Blake, if I were to drug you, put you on a plane, and you woke up anywhere on the planet outside of the U.S., what's the best or worst spot you could imagine?
Wait, what did you put in this coffee you handed me earlier?
Welcome to the Church Gear Podcast, where we pull the tech out of the booth and onto the stage to share the most outlandish stories and hidden wisdom from the tech trenches. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm your host, Blake Hodges, a man who is recently getting close to passing out from these drugs that Toby gave me. And I'm here with my co-host who has the spy skills of James Bond, Toby Walters.
You know, I've always thought about drugging you before an episode and you just like start slowly slurring and then you're just out. And then I'm just hosting the podcast and there's nobody else to stop me from getting canceled by things I say.
See, Toby, that wouldn't work because I'm articulate as four-letter word is one of the things I say whenever.
Poop?
Yeah, I'm very articulate. So I think you could drug me pretty hard and I'd still be fine.
Is poop articulate?
No, well, it does make a sound for some people, but if a bear does it, they don't hear it unless they're in the woods.
Okay, Blake, today we have to, I don't need to drug you, but we need to talk about a place that is in the U.S., but at this place, you can actually go anywhere on the planet or in the universe, so to speak. So, Blake, have you heard of the Sphere?
Yes,
Vegas?
I've seen it online, and Toby, I'm ready to get on a plane to go see this. I'm ready to brave the planes.
So, I mean, I've heard about it for months. I was listening to Smartless, the podcast, and Bono was on, and they teased about it was even before it was officially announced that U2 was going to have a residency at the Sphere.
Did they tell Bono we didn't know who he was? Was he offended?
I know who Bono is, Blake. Oh my gosh. So, yeah, you've seen some of the footage. I watched a bit of a YouTube video with Bono and The Edge touring the space, and I saw, like, they just opened, I think, a week or two ago. And so I saw footage from some of our friends that got to go that like Tony Stairs with Lavo was there because I think Lavo has some element of the production there, but like it's unreal. Have you seen like the visuals like inside and outside?
I've seen mostly stuff on the outside. I've only seen a little bit on the inside, but man, I'm ready to mortgage my house and go see a show there.
That's about what it costs, it seems like.
That's what I would assume.
So some of the stats on this thing I was reading, it's great. So it was more expensive than the Raiders Stadium.
Well, the Raiders suck. Nobody likes them.
And it said because of the COVID, you know, everything got more expensive in COVID and the construction costs, it ended up being over $2.3 billion.
I swear I'm gonna have gray hair and people are still gonna be blaming stuff on COVID. I'll be like, why can't I buy any Kleenex? Because of COVID.
So on the outside, so like both the inside and the outside are just absolute like technological masterpieces as far as the LED elements, and we'll get into the sound a little bit too, but on the outside there's, I think it was 1.2 million, it said hockey puck sized LEDs. So I guess if they go out, like you can pop, I don't know how the technology works.
I was literally going to bring that up when you stopped talking, is when I've seen the images, I've thought, I wonder what the repair cost and time is for this thing. Because, you know, stuff's going to go out eventually.
Yeah. And of course, there are all these people making comments online about it's going to cause accidents. And I would assume it's going to, because there's a highway right next to it. Just the visuals created on it are so stunning. And so inside, it doesn't say it's the biggest LED in the world. It, you know, certainly is one of, but it's like
Wait a minute, it's not?
It's the highest resolution LED of that size in the world at this point. I don't know what's bigger, but I know like some stadiums, like Cowboy Stadium has a massive LED screen, you know, in their center.
We also hate the Cowboys, Toby.
So it seats 18,000 people, which is crazy for a theater. Like that's more than most basketball arenas seat.
It is the shape of a basketball.
And the fact that it's really like, you know, you think of an amphitheater where the seats just go up one direction. It's not surrounded, but 18,000 seats, like that is a huge sphere. And I read this and I had to make sure that I was reading this correctly. There are 160,000 speakers in there.
Toby, I know we talked about doing a Church Gear field trip to Sweetwater, but can we please do it to the Sphere instead?
Yes, 100%.
All right, you heard it. It is on record. Cha-ching.
So did you see any of the visuals from like the U2 show, like the scenery that they create on the LED screen?
I don't really care to look at YouTube
Oh
stuff.
my gosh, Blake.
I've seen a lot of stuff on the outside. I've not seen an inside show thing. Is that on YouTube?
Yeah, you can see it on YouTube. I mean, I've seen
YouTube.
YouTube on YouTube. So I've seen a lot of visuals, just people posting, sharing on Facebook, pictures from stuff. So they can, I mean, one of the sceneries, they're just playing in the desert. And the size of the LED and the way that it like all the way wraps around, like I'm sure sitting in there, you feel like you're in the desert. And then there are just incredible visuals they create with just things that you can't see in real life that you can do on I think it's like a 16K LED screen.
You know what they have done is the way they shoot Star Wars. Now, I have a very small understanding of this, but like in Atlanta, they have a circular room with panels that they like. That's how they did The Mandalorian to make it look like they're anywhere in the universe. They basically just scaled this puppy up and then now do concerts in it. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. And like lighting is very minimal. I think they have like 12 lights. And everything else
is the whole thing is
all
a
about
light.
the visuals of the LED screen and obviously the sound. If you have 160,000 speakers in there, they just talk about, and you didn't catch that.
You said 160 speakers.
No,
160,000
160,000 speaker drivers in there. And so they said the audio is like nothing you've ever heard. It just feels like the audio is right in front of your face. And they can, there's so many people talking about, like you go to a concert. Blake, what was the last concert you went to? Was it
the
NF
concert?
And, you know, the sound can be like, it was mixed grade at NF,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
actually
still
thought it was great.
Like it exhausts your ears eventually at that level. But they're saying in this environment, the way it works, like it is simply not exhausting. It's not painful to listen to. They can turn it up, they can turn it down. And it's just like,
Is it soundscape?
no, it's a completely different.
Boo.
I think your mind would be literally blown if and when we do the Church Gear field trip to the Sphere. But if you could imagine like having the great artists of history having an unlimited palette of things they could achieve, I can't even imagine what that's like.
The only thing more high end and desirable than that is Drake Kelch, the former Bethel church production manager and owner of LAD Designs. Drake, welcome to the podcast. And have you seen the Sphere yet in person?
Thanks, guys, for having me. I have not seen it in person. I'd love to join the field trip to go check it out. But it's pretty remarkable what they did. I have seen a lot of the inside clips that have come from that concert, and what you can create content-wise is pretty crazy and immersive.
Do you lay awake at night and just imagine the things that you could create on the LED screen if you had full access?
The things that we think about, because it's been going around in our group text, is like, what does the raster for that look like? How do you even create content, especially for the outside that's round, but technically on a timeline you'd be looking at it as a square, but you have to create it in a way to where it actually makes it circular. So it's like mind-boggling thinking about how you would actually create content to make it look round.
Do you know or think that they've created a new technology for the designers to create this in, like, are they creating round computer monitors where they can build this stuff in 3D software?
My guess is that it's some sort of software like viewing 360 GoPro footage or 360, instant 360 footage, where like that footage, you can kind of see it get all rounded, even though it's still in a square environment. You can see the roundness of it. So I'm assuming it's some sort of software that they're putting it into to represent the roundness. So that way you can like take your square video files and put them in another software. That's my guess. The inside is probably a lot easier because it's more linear. The outside has got to be crazy because that's a full-on circle, and the stitching looks fantastic from what I've seen online. It's like that content looks really, really good.
And do you know if they're doing much camera work in there? Like, is the band up on the screen, or is it all just visuals that they've created?
From what I saw from the YouTube conference or concert, it was all visuals. Like, I didn't see any iMag. I'm assuming that you could put iMag up It's probably some sort of like disguise server or multiple servers to drive all that content just because of how high res the screen is. But even seeing the content that like moves up and down, it looks like it's moving up and down through the room, and it's just all a video illusion to see it coming up and down. And like you were saying, the desert feel of just looking like this massive landscape, and it feels like you're in this desert landscape is pretty unreal. So the visuals that you can create is pretty insane.
Blake, I feel like you'd be at the concert and the visuals would go away and then they'd have the band up on the screen as IMAG and you'd be like, what the heck? Who are these people on the screen? Put back the visuals.
Yes. I want to.
It's true.
I'm going to have to text Bono at the end of this and be like, hey, man, did you get tired of it by like the, what is it, 50th show? How long do residencies go? I wonder if it'll ever get tiring to them or if the last day will still be as good as the first.
And I do have a friend with Bono's cell number if you need it.
Your friend is me. Dude, I want to ask him, like, seriously, I want to know. Hang on, why hasn't he been on the podcast yet then?
We're working out the details, Blake.
Come on, Toby. Okay, well, speaking of some details, let's do some 5 truths and a lie with Drake Kelch. Although Drake, he knows a lot about the sphere, but he can't count. He's got us 5 bullet points instead of a 6.
What if he forgot the lie?
I noticed that when I got your email back, I was like, wait a second. Did I only said 5 things over?
I hope the lie is still in there. Okay, Here we go.
He's a video guy. He can't count.
Number 1, I got hired for my first production job at 13.
Well, he's like 16 now,
you
so.
beat me to that one. Number 2, I've been to 46 states and 14 countries. Now, here's the deal. Last week, Eddie got us on this one, so now I don't know who to trust with these.
You're wondering, how many states are there in America?
No. I know there's 50-ish. I say the ish because we really got a lot of providences we don't count. Yeah. Number 3, I always go chop my own Christmas tree. Number 4, I once vlogged 90 days in a row.
Maybe you could ask him the Bono question, like, do you get tired of vlogging, 90 days in a row like Bono does with his residency?
Can you imagine shooting a video of yourself and then seeing it in the sphere? That'd be so big.
Oh, man.
Number 5, I've owned every single Red camera model made. Well, how many are there, though? Is that like an impressive thing? Do you know the answer to this, Toby?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I know the name of a few of them, Komodo and is it Dragon?
Well, Komodo is a dragon, so that's hilarious.
Well, they're 2 different models, but...
2 different dragons. All right.
Yeah. Do you have a feel?
You know what? I'm ready to be heard again. I'm going to do I've been to 46 states and 14 countries.
Okay. And I'm going to say he has not owned every single Red camera model made.
Drake.
Nice.
Who's right, Drake?
I have not owned every Red
model. I even cheated for this one. I Googled how many were there, and I saw there was only 3, and I thought, this guy's probably had all 3. Dang it.
Well, so technically there's only 3 current models. There have been a long list of models, and it gets kind of confusing. I've owned several of them, but I have not owned all of them. And if people follow me, like have looked me up, you would see all the Red posts, and so I was like, I'll throw that one in there because that could probably get someone. But I have been to almost every state and several countries.
So Blake learned the term Red as far as cameras go. It wasn't very long ago, and you went along with Nathan, our video tech, to visit your own church, Blake, Fellowship, and they were talking about their camera upgrade that they were doing, and they were talking about all these Canon models, and then Blake's comment was, "Oh, are you guys getting Red cameras?"
I was trying to show off that I knew a term.
And then all the production guys just look at him, and then Nathan kind of puts his hand on his shoulder and says, "Blake, no more talking for the rest of this visit."
I will say that was at my own home church. That's the toughest crowd I've ever had in my life. I could not. They wasn't going to work.
And to be fair, Blake, like Canons often have like a little bit of red in their, like branding on their cameras. So,
yes.
It can be very confusing for simple minds like you.
Oh, well, speaking of something that wasn't simple, how did you vlog for 90 days in a row? Did you have a topic or a theme?
That was back when I was touring a lot. And so it was like right before I got married and then kind of went on the road a lot. And so I would just vlog every day. Definitely got inspired by like the Casey Neistat and those vloggers back then when a daily vlog was actually like a common thing. I feel like it's not anymore. And I think I posted 100 something vlogs, but only made it that 90 days in a row. And I go back and watch them now and like show my 5-year-old, and I'm like, wow, these are horrible vlogs. And some are really short, some are really long, but I was just trying to create something every single day. The hardest part was, like at night, sitting down, editing something to tell a story and publishing it every single day was the hardest part of doing that. I don't know if I would attempt to do a daily vlog again. I do post random vlogs here and there from a tour or something, but it's more like I'll wrap up a whole tour in one video instead of trying to create something every day.
And I can definitely attest to the fact that my children are my toughest critics when it comes to anything video that I'm on.
Yeah, I think they've loved you less now that you're in so much video content.
I almost feel like they love it more because they will pull it up on YouTube. They'll watch it a whole bunch, memorize it, and then make fun of me, like repeating it all back to me.
Well, maybe this is why our ad budget is getting drained. Can you tell them to lay off? Goodness.
Okay, so you're in Colorado, right? Is that what leads you to, because you're surrounded by Christmas trees is what we assume, but are you just, did you grow up that way of chopping your own tree?
Yeah, I do live in Colorado. I live in Fort Collins, which is like an hour north of Denver. But even in Redding, and like we've always, as a family, gone and cut down a Christmas tree. And so when I was dating, got married, it was like we just kept that tradition. Like I'd bring her along to cut our own tree. And so we've just kept that tradition of always going and cutting a tree. And now, like my 5-year-old really looks forward to going and cutting down a tree instead of, going to the lot to buy one. So it's just kind of something that we've always done and we'll probably keep doing.
And do you do the traditional Chevy Chase thing where you're cutting down, way too big a tree and your wife's begging you to find something smaller, but you're like, nope, I'll make it fit.
But we try to get something reasonable. In this house currently, we actually finally have a tall ceiling living room, so I could actually cut down like a 12 to 13 foot tree and it fits. Versus like when we were in our apartment, we had a 500 square foot apartment when we were first married, and it was like you could get a 7-foot tree, and like it was very, very small. So like at least we can cut down a bigger tree, but I try to like find the perfect one that's the perfect size and not chop down this massive thing.
Blake, have you ever chopped down a tree?
Toby, I could kick a tree down. No, I have never.
We're going to go outside after this podcast and you're going to prove this.
All right. Sounds good.
Then I'm going to take you to the hospital.
We have
you break your leg.
We have workman's comp here, right?
Nope. It's going to be outside the property of Church Gear.
Dang it. Man, Drake, you're kind of getting me inspired. Now I want to chop down a tree. Okay, well, let's cut into your background. Tell us a bit about Bethel.
Yeah, and I've always been curious about Bethel. Blake, I don't know if you I've always thought of Bethel as like the music artists that come out of there, the songs that come out of there. We sing so many like Bethel songs. So the Bethel school, I'm assuming, Drake, and you can tell us more about this, like you went the production route. Is there like production routes and worship routes? And is it just a school? Is it a church? Like what's going on at Bethel?
Yeah. So that is where I got hired at 13. That was my first production job. And so my family moved there to go to the school. So both my parents went to the school. I was the kid that didn't really love going to like kids' church or youth group or anything like that. And so I would volunteer and just help out in like the production world. Our family kind of became friends with the guy who was the production manager at the time. So we were all like family friends. And so jokingly, I was like, hey, I'm here every week doing sound for youth group. Why don't you just, hire me? And it was like, I was serious, but I was also like, figured he would not take me serious. And he was like, okay, sure. And so they hired me and I had to do the whole like school, like get a work permit through school and everything to actually work at that age. But I got hired to do sound for youth group. And that was kind of my start there. And I worked up from that position. So from there, I went to like mixing monitors for school. And then as different production managers came in, I just kind of worked my way up all the way until my last 3 years there, I was the PM. So that allowed me to do, I've done every like position there. I've done front of house monitors. I've been the lighting director. I toured with Bethel Music as the lighting director. I've been over visuals, like for LED and all the content on the stage, and then video director as well as the production manager. So kind of done it all. But the school is a 3-year school. And just now, like just the last 2 years, they've opened up a production track. So funny enough, they haven't had a production track up until now. And it's really just a ministry school. The first year is about 1,500 people. The second year is about 700-800. And then the final year is, I think it's grown. It's about 200-ish. And those are all interns. That's kind of the school works. The school keeps the production team very, very busy. So each year has 2 sound engineers because they do worship every day. And so they have to facilitate that. All the speaking, there's now BSSM online. So it's an online version of the school. So the whole video team is involved all the time, filming stuff. So it is a pretty involved thing that is a part of the church.
Toby, instead of hiring people next time, let's make our own college because that's what they did. How
That's
genius.
Right. And Drake, I've known a Bethel for 10 or 15 years, is very influential, cutting edge in the, worship movement and worship culture. Was production, always that way with Bethel, or is that more of a recent thing that they've really come into the, the world of taking production seriously and being on the cutting edge of that?
Yeah, it wasn't really until 2015, 2016, around that time where production really started growing. Worship was always a thing. And sound was always a thing that was like huge with how the record sounded, how the room sounded. But that was kind of the only focus. When Clint All, he actually got hired as the production manager right after Chris Greeley. Chris Greeley really shaped the sound for Bethel as far as like producing the music and mixing, because he produced and mixed most of the records from, it was before, For the Sake of the World is when he started coming onto the scene. And then he helped hire Clint, and Clint really came in and was like, man, music and sound is great. You guys lack everything else. And he has a huge production background outside of the church. So that helped. He really was able to help like influence production and know a lot more than just church production. He knew real production. And so, the first thing we did was change their lighting. Instead of running fluorescent lights in the sanctuary for worship and one look on the stage, he was like, okay, we need to not have fluorescent lights, and we need to, be able to change the stage look. And so it kind of, everything evolved from that point, but that was kind of the pivotal moment to where now, since COVID hit, I feel like the video started becoming influential there, and just kind of how they started doing things. Actually before that, it was about 2018, 2019 is when that, started taking place. So yeah, it is a more recent thing.
And as we traveled to churches all over the country over the last couple of years, we're hearing this said more and more. And I know you can help explain this, but churches are going for that cinematic look. I've heard this over and over again. We're going for a more cinematic look, so we're going to red cameras or whatever that. Can you explain to us what that means?
Yeah, the cinematic look. I guess going back, the standard broadcast has been, I call it traditional broadcast. It's a 60p look, which is 60 frames per second. It's very, it's all cover shots. It's like very overview. It's like, here's the vocalist, here's the room, here's the vocalist, here's the room. It's that type of cut. When you think about sports or, award shows, things like that, that's all traditional broadcast. And what we started doing, and I started getting this from the albums that were shot at Bethel, and they would shoot them in 24 frames per second, produce them in a more cinematic, concert film type look. And my thought was always, why not do this live? Like, this looks so much better. What we post on YouTube from the albums is this cinematic, produced look. And yet the live stream looks like this sports broadcast that doesn't feel very inviting. It's just very, overview. And so my whole goal is to take that cinematic concert film and actually just do it live. And nowadays with like the Komodos, like this guy and other cameras, Sony and Canon make great cameras. It's way easier. Back when we started doing it, honestly, the Blackmagic cameras were kind of the only cameras that were a hybrid in that. And it was a lot harder to achieve that look. And everyone kind of laughed at us for wanting to do that look. But one of the biggest fundamental pieces to achieve that is you have to be in 24 frames per second. And that's what movies are shot in. And yeah.
Is it simply a gear swap, or is it a completely fundamentally different approach to video production?
It's both. These days, if you have modern gear, your gear probably can support this. I mean, you can do it with pockets and an A10 Mini Pro. Like, you can do it with simple equipment, but the approach is definitely a lot different. And even trying to take the same approach with a 60p system, in my opinion, it looks really bad. And so the 24 frames per second is like the fundamental part of it to achieve the look, but then it is your approach and where your cameras are placed, how you utilize those cameras, and even like what shots you're getting. Some of the things that drive me nuts about broadcast, and I'll see this on television all the time, is like there might be a guitar solo and you never see that person playing the guitar. And part of what we're trying to show, and if you watch concert films like what's on Hulu and Netflix, whenever those parts, they're actually showing what's happening. So if there is a guitar solo, they're getting a shot of that guitar solo. So that's helping the viewer feel more engaged in what's happening in the room, especially if you can't be in the room. You want to see what's happening. So if you hear it, you should also see it. And that's kind of part of the approach to a more cinematic style. And there's a lot more in there. There's so many things with like depth of field and camera placement. And I mean, there's so much to go into, but changing your approach and getting into a 24 frames per second workflow are like the two main things that you have to start with.
Do you have to have handheld cameras in order to do this, or can you create a cinematic approach just with static cameras on tripods?
You don't have to have handhelds. And we're actually doing a conference at the beginning of next year where we won't have any handheld cameras. Part of that is that churches like how they want to do video is just a lot more still and a lot more simple, but with correct camera placement and using things like dollies that can create movement without being handheld, they're still fixed to something. You can have those big moves and still create a good feel for your broadcast and still make it cinematic. And most of that is going into like camera placement and depth of field and really good lighting that will help create that atmosphere.
And Blake, we've given you a handheld camera around here before, and you've done your darndest. And
well, Toby, that's why we've got the repair room.
So I'm assuming, Drake, at most churches, like they're lucky if they have a full-time video director on staff.
They're lucky if they have a church tech on staff with maybe a part-time guy.
So I'm guessing if churches want to go in this more cinematic approach, obviously they need to understand the work involved in that. But if you're talking about, static cameras and dollies and different things like that, I assume it's easier to use less staff if you don't use handhelds. Because I assume, we've given Blake, if you gave me a handheld camera, sure, I can shoot stuff, but who knows if it's going to be
well, it depends. If
anything good.
If it's on the Ronin, I actually felt pretty decent with the Ronin. But what I'm hearing is you don't hire staff. You just go find the 13-year-old kid in the youth group. You laugh. Look, we're looking right at him. And he's got the best display of anyone we've ever recorded with. So I think that might be step one.
Is there a lot of training involved for handheld, just learning what to shoot?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely a learning curve with running a handheld camera. And honestly, to your point, like some of the best ops, we did this church in 2020. We put red cameras in and all this stuff. And their best operator, who's now their director, was 16 at the time. And he watched all of our stuff, so that helped. But he got it right away and took all the feedback that we have. And you could tell he had the rhythm. He plays guitar and drums, so he's musically inclined, which helps a lot. He understands where the set's going and all those things. So, I mean, to your point, there's great, 13, 16, even older people that can get it really, really fast. I'm doing a coaching at a church next month, and their main team is like that 13 to 17-year-olds is like their main camera team. And they do run a couple of handhelds, and they have a couple cameras on sticks. And I feel like it's easiest to go crazy with your broadcast when you have handhelds. And that's like the number one thing that we get feedback from pastors of like, oh, we don't like that. So it's a lot easier to get crazy with it. But if you can dial it in and hone that in, which takes some time, it can add to the broadcast really, really well. But I will say there's sometimes for the directors and to create the look and the vision, it is better to go the route of like, okay, let's work with some static cameras, your main follow, your 45, your big wide of the room, and then maybe a couple lock-offs on stage that are showing keys and drums. That way we can show the main things that's happening, but then that allows you to get your timing down. It allows you to get all of your establishing shots there before you start moving around.
And I think, even in my worship pastor background, but also thinking like a pastor, I would assume a lot of pastors struggle with, I don't want handhelds on stage because it's really distracting to have cameramen moving around the musicians while people in the room are trying to worship. And so I've seen a lot of creative things at churches that we've got to visit recently, like with dolly systems and like some of the flyover cameras on like pulley systems. It looks like there are really cool tools these days where you can not distract in the room while you're doing worship and still create a lot of movement in your shots.
Yeah, for sure. I think these days the tools make it even easier to create this look. The cameras are smaller, the systems are better. I love using like the Defy rhythm tracks and their cable cams. I love being able to replace a jib with a cable cam because for pastors, it puts seats back on the floor. And it is more stealthy instead of this thing like right above your head. It's, ways up there. We've done it where we've put motorized sliders at drums and at keys. So that way it is doing this, automated movement back and forth at drums, which adds movement, but not a person. And it's not just a static, like single shot of the drums. It adds a little bit of feel in there. So there's loads of tools. And that motorized slider, back in the day would cost thousands. And now you can get cheaper ones for a few hundred that does the same thing.
Blake, this whole like technology advancement makes me very upset because when I was a worship pastor, like
back in my day,
exactly. Back in my day, we didn't have all these cool tools. And now like, the point of entry is so reasonable. Like Drake here at Church Gear, we thought to ourselves, what's the lowest point of entry into a brand director? And it was Blake.
Well, like back in my day, you could get them cheaper.
So Drake, what, for the church that has very limited resources, what are some of the lowest points of entry for them to start looking at, creating a bit of a cinematic feel for their live streams?
Yeah. And I know for some churches it might sound like a lot, but one of the cheapest setups that I did for a church, it was like $14,000, I think. And that was a pretty great setup. I don't even think the Ada Mini Pro was a tool at that point. So theoretically, it could get cheaper than that. And that was mainly using the Blackmagic, the 4K studio camera, the new one, and the Pocket 4Ks, which are kind of the cheapest cinema camera that I would recommend. They're like $1,500, I think. Maybe the studios are like $2,000. So very cheap, and the MFT lenses are a lot cheaper than going with like Canon glass and EF. So I think in that 10K range, you could have a cinematic setup, and that was with 4 cameras. Things like wireless are going to start, making things more expensive, and you can always upgrade your glass. I will definitely say that I would put more money into making the lighting look good on stage than I would on the cameras. So like if I'm doing a shoot and I have the option of having minimal lighting, but I could have Komodos, or great lighting and I had to use pockets, I'd probably lean towards the pockets or even the A7S and go that direction, because great lighting is going to make or break that cinematic look even more. So I'll always go the lighting route. But yeah, I think the lowest point of entry is probably for a good setup. And again, if you went 1 or 2 cameras, it's going to be cheaper, but around that 10 grand mark using a lot of the Blackmagic products.
Blake, I feel like we've heard over and over again video directors talk about the importance of lighting for video, that, we understand we want it to look in the room, but if you want the video to come through well, you need to also consider lighting for video.
Yeah, it definitely seems like one of the best hot tips is if you want to make your video better, you got to talk to your lighting guy. Which, if you're the video guy, is great, because all your problems are the video or the lighting guy's fault.
Just blame the lighting guy.
Yes.
So, Drake, maybe that's the answer to this question, but
to blame the lighting guy?
What are some of the quickest ways for churches to immediately make their video content better?
Other than hiring a bunch of 13-year-olds, because we know that's step 1.
Yeah, I would say most of the places that reach out to me and we talk about their broadcast, I'll do a consult and they'll send me their live stream. Most of the time, I feel like they're expecting me to come in and be like, all right, you need to change your directing, you need to change your camera positions. Most of the time I see it and I'm like, oh, you got to change your lighting. And they're kind of like, well, what? But I'm like, yeah, you don't have any stage wash. You don't have, you don't have great front light. Your room is completely black. It's like all those things that I start going into details of, and it's all lighting based. And then I get to, okay, maybe change these camera positions or try, these camera moves instead. But things like, we love putting wash lights in the crowd, because if you're not lighting the crowd, one, in the audience, it can feel rather dark. On camera, you have this black hole, black sea, as we call it, of people, and then a lit stage. Looks really odd.
I have
and when
always
you can
thought
light
that.
them, yeah, exactly. When you light them, it actually feels better in the room, in my opinion, with a nicely lit audience, even during worship, and then being able to change the colors to match what's happening on the stage. So now you're inviting everyone into the same atmosphere instead of separating the two. So now you're all the same. Having lights that change colors really helps. And you can do it with, modern house light fixtures or RGB-W. And then, or at Bethel, we didn't have that. So we just used cheap, like the Megalight strobes. They're strobes, but they're big wash lights basically, and just washed the whole room with it. And it created this contrast for video, but you can still see the audience. So when we're getting reaction shots, when we're doing the big wides with jibs, instead of just this black hole, you're seeing the people actually be able to be in focus. So that's a big one. Getting your key light, like your front light, correct. A nice wash for speaking. If your singers aren't stationary, or if they are stationary, having like spots that are dialed in for those spots. And then having good wash over your stage. Like, it's fun to have tight beams and things waving around, and churches love that. But if you don't have that general wash over the stage, your video is going to suffer. And like, for example, we never light band members individually. We just have a big enough, good enough wash over the stage and around the stage that they're being lit from the color that's being put on the stage. They're never being directionally lit. The only people that we front light are the vocals or the speakers. So those are kind of the main things that I always start with churches wanting to upgrade their video.
I feel like, Blake, if we could just, educate churches and production, and I know a lot of people that have been in production a long time realize these things, but it's often just the simplest beginning thing that you need to start with. We always jump to, well, shoot, I got to buy a new, Digico Quantum 338 because my sound system doesn't sound good. Like, it's often the simplest thing. It's often the source that you're providing. It's like, the drums don't sound good. Well, have you changed the heads? You don't need new mics.
Is your drummer awake? Also, you heard Zach Brady, never waste a good crisis. Sometimes, now I'm starting to wonder how often something's broken or not.
It's a good call.
Well, even like with sound, like you mentioned, you could have a 338 great console. If you have, a cheap QSC PA or a room without treatment, that 338 is doing hardly anything to improve your sound.
Yeah.
Maybe your online mix is going to sound great, but your room is still going to sound really bad. So there's the fundamentals that you have to do first. I would always recommend a good PA and stick with your X32 before you upgrade your console with a really, really bad PA.
That's a good point. All the best techniques in the world aren't going to sound good if they're coming out of a bad PA. Drake, whenever you're talking to churches, do you ever have a difficulty explaining kind of the why behind, why video is important? Because you're consulting for churches and they yes, they got to be able to hear it. But do you ever have to, do some of that mission vision kind of work between saying this is why good video is important to reaching, the lost with the gospel?
Honestly, I think that has changed since COVID because every church had to flip gears really fast and go online if they weren't, because no one was allowed to meet in person. And so I feel like that trend for not wanting good video or even video at all has completely changed to where now everyone wants that video. And even if they're back in the room, which everyone is probably back in the room, they still live stream, even if they weren't before. And so now most of my calls that I get are churches coming to me saying, hey, we got this system when we had to go online, but now we really want to make it better. Like, how do we make this better? And sometimes it's they got a great backbone and they just need some better cameras, or sometimes it's a whole new system. And sometimes they have amazing gear. It's just the approach on how they're doing video. So I don't feel like I'm having to argue with anyone that the importance of having video anymore.
Drake, talking about consulting for churches, and I've seen you talk about this online recently. Churches often get bad advice and they get the wrong integrator doing their project. Let's mention a friend of ours, the right integrator, Summit Integration that's just down the road from you. Like, I'm not worried if a church hires Summit Integration. They're going to get incredible, everything. Like, they're going to be well taken care of. But what are some of the common things that you're seeing of churches just not knowing what they're getting into, getting bad information? Like, what are you often having to come in and help re-educate or fix for them?
Yeah. I think sadly there's so many integrators and a lot of them are great. And a lot of them, it's pretty split. They just don't know exactly what they're doing, or they have their way of doing things that might not be professional. So I feel like a lot of times it's me coming in and giving the advice of, one, I would always bid out your project. Don't just go with one person and get their bid. Look at all the other players that you could. And I understand sometimes you can't fly in people, like you can't fly in Summit or you can't fly in Skylark or any of these integrators who are going to be more expensive. But I would definitely get multiple bids just to make sure, one, you're not getting ripped off. I think that's the number one thing that I see is, sadly, churches are still getting ripped off by integrators where they're paying high dollar, you're not getting great equipment, or the equipment's not getting integrated properly. So I would definitely look at the resume of that integrator of like previous jobs. It's really easy to reach out to another church and ask them how it went with that integrator, and they're going to be more than happy to talk about it, whether it is good or bad. And those are kind of the things that I'm helping in conversations of just like, hey, let's make sure you get the right gear for your room and not just what the company can sell you. Because some of these integrators, the big ones can sell whatever, it's fine. But some of the smaller ones, they sell what they can get and what they're dealers of. And sometimes that's not what should be in that room. And that's where we like to come in and help them understand, like, okay, this is actually what your room needs or should have, rather than what you're being sold, if that makes sense.
Blake, it sure be nice if we could just fix every instance that churches are getting bad information.
I was gonna joke, should us, Drake, a couple of our buddies, should we all get together and kind of make a list of who to work with and who to not? It'll kind of just be like our little black book, and it's like a mythos. We don't publish it. You just church techs pass it around from one another, and that's how we weed out these integrators that are giving them bad gear.
I think we need like a Yelp for.
No, it's got to be secret.
It's got to be secret. Okay.
Well, it's got to be secret because one, that builds the mythos, and two, that's
secret Yelp.
Yes, secret Yelp. Maybe you could be the Duke of secret Yelp.
Ooh, I can check in the most. Okay, Drake, who are some of the, let's just start with churches. Like, are there certain churches out there that you are watching because they're doing such cool stuff? What have you seen that's really interesting lately?
And when is your next rap album coming out?
Cute, Blake, cute.
Honestly, I feel like I try to watch as many like live streams on Sunday and that kind of thing as possible. YouTube kind of feeds me a lot of live streams.
Like a true millennial, YouTube really feeds me.
Yeah. I mean, I think honestly the big churches are doing so. I mean, obviously Passion, their sets are really cool. In the Belonging Code, they just did their conference, which was a really cool set. And I think I'm always looking at ideas to take it to the next level. I'll get inspired by one element that a church is doing. But I take that beyond churches. I like to go watch like TV and actual like concerts that are being done outside of the church world, and to find that one element that's like, oh, I like that. Let's take that idea, those kinds of things. So I would definitely recommend, if you're trying to design and create, broaden your search beyond what the church is doing. I don't know if this is directly answering your question, but there is a lot of really cool things being done outside of the church world. And if we can get inspired by certain elements that they're doing and bring it into what we're doing, I think it can be really successful.
And are there any projects that you've been involved in recently that you're really proud of, like you guys did something different and unique and that you're excited about?
One of the cool projects that we got to do this year is we filmed the One Day Houston event, which is like a charity conference, or not conference, concert, basically, a benefit concert. And I mean, that was really epic. Nothing's out yet. And I'm not sure if all the footage is going to get released, but it was multiple different artists. And, we filmed it all on Reds, and we had, 2 rhythm tracks and a cable cam, and it was in an arena. That was kind of a really cool project for us. But next year we have multiple projects that we're working on that I can't talk about yet, that I'm really, really excited for, kind of the vision and where they're heading production wise. So I think next year it's going to be really fun with like all stage design stuff, set design. That's going to be really fun. But yeah, this year, that One Day Houston event was probably a really fun way to bring the cinema broadcast, what we do, into an arena and film non-Christian artists. Was really cool.
Blake, do you think he can't talk about it, but it's actually Drake's tour next year?
I was going to say, are you working with anybody we would recognize? You're really teasing us here.
You don't have to say who, but would we recognize them?
Yeah, would we recognize their name or the event name?
Yeah, probably.
Is it the Super Bowl? Come on.
I wish. We actually were talking through Defy, who makes the cable cams and stuff. They were going to have multiple systems on Drake's tour. And it was kind of funny because they were like, had called me asking if I wanted to operate any of these. I was like, well, that'd be kind of funny. But then I think he broke his leg or something and they canceled the tour, or at least part of the tour. And so it was like, that never happened.
That's unfortunate.
Man, we could have had Drake on Drake squared.
And I've always wanted to know, well, not always, because this has been a more recent thing, but Blake, if you notice, like in the last couple years of the NFL, the live streams that, we have the normal sports broadcasting, like the wide shot, but then when they're scoring touchdowns, like the handheld, and it's very in focus and then very out of focus around the edges. How do they do that, Drake? I'm not a video guy, but it's so cool.
Yeah, they have started doing their depth of field cams, as they call them, and I've seen and talked to some people about this. Usually they're using like FX9s because right now Sony has the Super Bowl contract. So they're mostly using Sony cameras for that. And so they use a lot of times the FX9 and sometimes even the FX3 on the sidelines, getting those super shallow depth of field. And so that's, a big full frame sensor, glass that is very fast. So it is probably, those 1.8 lenses that are getting that massive depth of field versus the cameras that are shooting, up in the stands, the coverage, they're using big box lenses and they're in that, 4 to 5, 6 range as far as aperture goes. So more is in focus, and that's part of being able to see the whole playing field in focus. You kind of need that to be that way. But then to get those, very depth of field dynamic shots on the sidelines, they're using faster glass. So it's just a different approach to how they're shooting it. And it has been really interesting to see how sports and bigger broadcasts have taken this cinematic turn and started implementing little things into their broadcasts.
Blake, I almost feel like I'm rooting for any team to score just so I can see those shots because they're just so cool.
I'm pretty sure they premiered this when the Commanders were playing because I was watching one of their games and it's the first one I'd seen it on, and it was such a great shot. They just never score touchdowns. They're quite a disaster of a team. Drake, speaking of disasters, you got any great disaster stories for us? Maybe when the video cut out or someone knocked over your, library of red cameras and they all broke. Like, got any disaster stories for us?
Oh man, this one I was trying to think of when I read it on the script. I was like, what can I say? And I've seen equipment break. I mean, when I was really young touring, I've dropped LED tiles accidentally, or I've seen a cart go underneath the wall as it was coming down, and like a tile got ripped off. I was trying to think. I've seen a Canon, like an 85 Cinema Prime. It's like a $5,000 lens or whatever, like roll off the table onto the ground. Like I've seen that happen. And that's pretty heartbreaking when gear like that just rolls off the table. I was trying to think of a disaster story, but a funny one was a buddy, William Monroe, and we got stuck in the Texas snowstorm that happened in, what was that, 2021? Is that when that happened? And we were stuck in our hotel, and we went to Target to get frozen meals that we could cook in our microwave, and there was hardly anything left. And we were just lucky that the hotel power stayed on, but we definitely got stuck in that for a couple of days. Drove to Houston to try to get a flight out, and the hotel couldn't accept our reservation. The flight got canceled. We somehow found an Airbnb in a really sketchy part of Houston to stay at. That was quite the story. We finally got out of there, but that was pretty crazy.
That was when you were on tour?
We weren't on tour. We were actually doing an install for a church.
Got it. And
we were there installing all their gear, and it just so happened that, the warnings of snow came, and we were like, it's Texas. What's going to happen, right? And then, no, it really snowed.
Yeah, so all my immediate family lives in DFW area, and I think my parents didn't have power for almost 2 days. It was wild.
Mm-hmm.
They say don't mess with Texas unless you're snow.
Yeah, they were cycling the power where we were at in Houston. It was on for 2 hours, off for 4 hours. And they were I don't know why they had to do it, but they were cycling it between, power grids. So that way your fridge would be on and your heater would be on for a couple hours, and then it would be off and that kind of thing.
Well, Texas is dumb, and they're independent. No, I'm serious.
The entire state is coming for you right now.
I am a Commanders fan. I'm just kidding. But if you look at it, their power grid is set apart from the rest of America. They're the only state that does that. So we couldn't send them any extra electricity.
I mean, Texas is almost its own country. I think most of the residents there would prefer it to be their own country.
Well,
they'll be the first to become their own country.
Mm-hmm.
Drake says the fall of America is happening next year. Oh, goodness. Well, before America falls, we better wrap this episode. So Drake, give us a tech takeaway, something we could tell our church tech folks that would make their lives easier, whether that be not to travel to Texas or to buy every red camera that there is.
Honestly, I probably I mean, I definitely said it earlier, but if you're really going for great video, make sure that your lighting is dialed and you put focus into your lighting. And if you have an operator running lights, make sure he has a multi-view to where he can see what the cameras look like right next to him. I see that all the time where LDs are running lights and they can't see what the cameras look like. And so they're just doing whatever they want for the room and don't pay any focus towards what the cameras look like. So you still need to see what the cameras look like.
That having the view is that's a good thought.
That's a good one. I like that a lot.
You can't adjust. Yeah, we haven't heard that one on there because you can't adjust it if you don't see it.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, Drake, what do you want to plug, man? It sounds like you got a lot going on, so I'm sure you got something to plug here.
We do too much. But I mean, our biggest things are consulting for churches, whether you're wanting to do, if you're in the process of doing an install, you're looking at doing an install, and then consulting with your stage design, your video look, that kind of thing. Anything production, visual related, we love to come in and help consult, design your system, or if you're looking to film a concert, your live album, looking for camera help or stage design help, that's what we do.
And where can people find you?
The easiest way, I mean, my Instagram, Drake Kelch, and Kelch, that's the last name. And then laddesigns.co is our website. Contact information's on there, our portfolio's on there, everything like that. So everything that we do is through Lad Designs. That's our main business.
Nice. Well, they know where to find you now. So get ready for those Instagram DMs. Drake, thanks for coming on the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was real fun.
Thanks for hanging out with us. We hope to see you back next week for more absurd stories, tech takeaways, and overall buffoonery here at the Church Gear Studios.
Blake, I feel like on this episode title that we don't need its last name. I mean, that's just superfluous. Let's just put, this episode featuring Drake.
Yes, let's do it. I'm down. Sold.
I don't think there'll be any confusion as to which Drake we're talking about. I think Drake Kelch will naturally just drive thousands and thousands and millions of listeners to this episode if we just drop his last name.
Toby, are you saying we're willing to halfway lie to get a bunch of listens on an episode?
Well, now I'm thinking are there any production guys with first name Beyonce?
Okay, well, if you can help keep me and Toby from committing half sins, send this episode to a friend. Just text it right to him. Be like, hey, this is a great episode and I love it. And also, I'm the video guy and you're the lighting guy and I need you to step it up so my video will look better.
Just like Drake's.
That was good. I was wondering what you were going to use.